Competitive Beyblade has always been a battle, not just in the stadium, but in balancing the game itself. With every new release, the meta can change in an instant. Some parts get stronger, others fade into obscurity, but when a part is too overpowered, it forces everyone to use it just to stay competitive. That's when power creep can take over. Now, power creep isn't unique to Beyblade alone, it happens in every competitive game. Think about Pokemon, where Mega Evolutions and/or Legendary Pokemons can make older picks obsolete. Or League of Legends, where new champions can drop with overloaded kits, forcing pro players to pick them or ban them every match.
No! No! Not again! No! 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 No!
But in those games, the developers have tools to fix things. They can drop balance patches, nerf broken characters, or introduce new formats. Beyblade though, it's a physical game. Once a part is released, its stats are set in stone. There's no update to tweak an overpowered part. Once it's out there, it's staying that way. So how is Beyblade balanced? Well, the biggest competitive community, the WBO, handled things by creating different formats, mainly separating parts based on weight classes. And it worked pretty well, but here's the thing, the WBO, it's not the official Beyblade organization, it's a fan-run group where anyone can host their own tournaments, meaning the competitive scene was mostly built by the players themselves. Then in 2012, something huge happened, the first official Beyblade World Championship. For the first time, the players had a structured, company-backed tournament run by Takara Tomy, Hasbro, and Sonocon. This was a major step forward. Fans were excited. The big question now was, how would they balance the game? And their answer? It was to just simply ban the 4D Beyblades, which is technically all the Beyblades in the third season. And honestly, that was a pretty smart move. The 4D parts were on a completely different level. They were heavier, stronger, and far beyond what earlier releases could handle. If they had been allowed, the entire tournament would be forced to utilize the 4D system, making every other part released beforehand pretty much useless. So restricting them? That made sense. It was a fair call. Or so it seemed. Because somehow, despite banning the current powerhouse Beyblades in the game, they completely overlooked one of the most overpowered non-4D releases ever made. This Beyblade was so absurdly strong that even without the 4D upgrades, it was the second heaviest Beyblade in the entire series, and it was fully legal, and yep, it dominated the competition. And that Beyblade was Twisted Tempo. Twisted Tempo, or the Japanese name Basalt Hirogium, was released in January 16, 2011. Classified as a defense type, this Beyblade was shown to be one of the main final antagonists in the second season of Beyblade. The reason why this Beyblade was considered overpowered was due to its fusion wheel, Twisted. And when you look back during that time to compare the average weights of the fusion wheels, you would see that they would hover at approximately 35 grams. But Twisted, it weighed an outstanding 47.6 grams, over 12 grams higher than the average wheel released at that time. Which even after all of the 4D releases, it would still be the second heaviest wheel, being eventually pushed out by the number one, Diablo. The only real attempt at balancing this fusion wheel was the so-called Staircase of Death, a deliberate chunk taken out of the inner wheel. And in theory, this was supposed to make the Beyblade slightly unbalanced, adding a layer of fairness. But in practice, the nerf was barely noticeable. The sheer weight and nearly perfect circular shape of the wheel overshadowed any intended drawback, which kept it as dominant as ever. Now, before we get back to the tournament, there's one more Beyblade that I need to mention. It wasn't as dominant as Twisted Tempo, but it still made a serious impact on the competition. This was Hell's Curbix, but unlike Twisted Tempo, the way this Beyblade was dominating was a combination between both the spin track and the wheel. This allowed it to create a wall-like shape, kind of like Twisted Tempo, which also made it hard for it to get knocked out and/or outspun. In retrospect, this was another way that Beyblade introduced power creep and not noticing it until the World Championship. By the way, if you guys are liking these type of videos so far, please consider subscribing. We are so close to 100k, and yeah, let's continue the video. To give some perspective, this Beyblade was good, but still not as great compared to Twisted Tempo. If giving the average Beyblade a B2C rating before the power creep came in, Twisted Tempo would be S+ tier, while Hell's Kerbex would be drifting around S- tier. Still a huge gap between the average Beyblade. And now if we go back to look at official tournament footage from quarterfinals to finals, anyone who was using an ordinary Beyblade against Twisted Tempo and or Hell's Kerbex seemed to lose. No longer can you use 90% of the wheels released in this era. Anyone who realized the strengths of Hell and Twisted would easily breeze through the bracket stage up to the finals. And not to mention, in this tournament, you were supposed to utilize more than one Beyblade in your lineup, which meant you can use both Twisted Tempo and Hell's Kerbex in your deck. It also probably doesn't help that they utilize the infamous Hasbro stadiums, which notably has a larger playing field, as well as only 2 knockout zones compared to the current standard competitive stadium with a slightly smaller playing field as well as 3 knockout zones. This basically made it impossible for any ordinary Beyblade to knock out your Beyblade if you were utilizing Twisted Tempo and or Hell's Kerbex. Which also meant that most battles ended in a sleep out, which in a viewer's perspective can be quite boring. Jumping into semifinals, they swapped out the Hasbro Stadium for the standard BB10, which made knockouts more likely, and at this point, most Beyblades that were in Twisted Tempo and or Hell's Kerbex were practically weeded out. And yeah, at this point, you were just seeing who built their Twisted Tempo and or Hell's Kerbex better. And to give some credit, after looking specifically at their builds, the 12-year-old Rio had a genius design. He utilized a smart technique, which was the combination of the 230 spin track and a metal ball. This inherently made his Beyblade way taller than the average Beyblade, which made it harder for anyone to knock him out. And because it was a tall Beyblade, it utilized a special interaction called destabilization, which forced the opposing Beyblade to hit your plastic 230 spin track, which also drained the opposing Beyblade's stamina. This made it hard for anyone to outspin and or knock him out. Now, in the finals is where things got a little wonky. They utilized the Tornado Beyblade Stadium, which consisted of a motorized spinning center with a small crater in the bottom. This would intentionally force your Beyblade to spin out of control, and the idea was for you to fling yourself at your opponent to knock them out. And guess what Beyblades the 2 finalists had? Well, if you guessed both of them having Twisted Tempo and Hell's Kerbex, you were correct. In the first match, Rio utilized an aggressive Hell's Kerbex with a short height build rather than using the synergized spin track against his opponent's Twisted Tempo. Unfortunately for the opponent, he wasn't utilizing the tall build that Rio had, which gave Rio an easy knockout utilizing the motorized stadium. The second match is when Rio's combo shined. That was Rio's signature Twisted Tempo 230 metal ball combo. And actually, thanks to its height, it stayed pretty stable in the motorized center, while the synergized Hell's Kerbex combos on the opposing side lost control. And the imbalance from Hell's Kerbex ultimately gave Rio the edge, securing the final point he needed to win the tournament. By the way, I'm not discrediting Rio's win here. He found the combos that were strong and utilized them the best compared to the rest of the competition. He absolutely deserved the championship, but I also can't help but wonder how the tournament would have been if these 2 parts were banned. Because in the current Metal Fight Limited format where these 2 parts are banned, the format has been so diverse with so many healthy combos available. So yeah, that's pretty much how a Beyblade World Championship kind of got ruined due to power creep. So now I want to know what you guys thought about all this. Should Takara Tomy have banned Twisted Tempo and Hell's Kerbex? Should they have only utilized one standard competitive stadium throughout the entire tournament? Remember, this was an official World Championship, so I feel like things should be a lot more sorted out and organized. And not to mention, this year they're also making a Beyblade X World Championship, so we're just waiting on how those rules will play out. So yeah, what do you guys think? But most importantly, I want to know, did these 2 Beyblades ruin a World Championship? And like always, thank you guys for watching this video. If you guys want more of these type of videos, consider subscribing and I'll definitely make more. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video.